Have you ever stopped to think about why some people connect with you so intensely, almost as if it were something inevitable? Sometimes, it seems that it is because of the way you are, your appearance or your charisma. But what if there's something much deeper going on behind the scenes of the human mind? Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest thinkers and scholars of psychology of the 20th century, believed that love does not happen by chance. For him, when someone falls in love with you, there are only two fundamental reasons, and both originate in the deepest layers of the human psyche. In this content, we will explore these fascinating ideas about love, projection, and the concepts of anima and animus, archetypes that live within each of us. The proposal is to understand why you attract certain people and what this reveals about your internal needs and theirs. Contrary to what many imagine, love is not a random event, a magic spark that comes out of nowhere. For Jung, even connections that seem spontaneous follow an invisible logic, an internal organization that has been shaped by years of experiences, unresolved emotions, and unrecognized desires. What seems like an unexpected encounter is actually the result of hidden forces within the unconscious. Each sudden affinity has behind it a silent psychological structure, as if it were an emotional architecture that directs us towards certain individuals and distances us from others. This is where Jung introduces the notion of projection. Each of us carries hidden images within our minds, pieces of who we are, who we once were, or who we wish to become. These internal parts, sometimes forgotten or repressed, do not disappear. They remain alive and manifest themselves through the people who cross our path. When we meet someone who awakens these inner images, we feel a deep attraction, almost magical. But in reality, we are not enchanted by that person exactly as they are. We are, in fact, seeing a part of ourselves reflected in her presence. Think, for example, of someone who has lived their whole life being careful, closed, afraid to show themselves emotionally. When that person finds someone spontaneous, vibrant, and courageous when expressing themselves, they can feel completely engaged. This admiration is not just a compliment, it is identification. The person who attracts him carries within himself something that is dormant in the other, a repressed potential, suffocated by time and circumstances. This force of attraction is real, but the engine behind it is the unconscious, which sees in that figure a path to its own growth. The same can happen the other way around. Someone may fall in love with you not for what is visible, but for what you, without realizing it, represent in your emotional life. You come to symbolize a missing piece, a trait, an energy, a feeling that person unconsciously seeks. In this scenario, you become a living representation of something that has not yet been developed internally by it. Here's the first reason: you reflect something that the other person doesn't have. It's not just about the idea that opposites attract. It is deeper. Opposites reveal what is absent. An extremely logical person can be enchanted by someone guided by emotions. An introspective individual may fall in love with someone who is an extrovert. Someone organized can be fascinated by someone who lives in improvisation. However, this admiration runs the risk of turning into emotional dependence. This happens when the person does not realize that what they see in you is something that they can cultivate in themselves. Instead of growing, it leans on you. Instead of loving, she needs it. And when that need changes, or when your humanity begins to show up, with its mistakes and imperfections, the attraction can fade. This is the trap of projection. It creates an illusion of connection that does not support reality. And when this fantasy is undone, the feeling that was born about it begins to crumble. Carl Jung went beyond the concept of projection by developing the theory of the archetypes called anima and animus. According to him, each human being carries, in his unconscious, an internal image of the opposite gender. In the case of men, this symbolic figure is the anima, the unconscious representation of the feminine. In the case of women, it is the animus, the inner figure of the masculine. These images are not mere personal preferences, nor learned social roles. They are deep patterns, shaped from childhood by our relationships with parental figures and by cultural symbols of what it is to be male or female. These archetypes are formed by myths, stories, traditions, and emotional experiences lived throughout life. Over time, these inner images gain emotional strength and become true affective models. Without realizing it, we carry within us a kind of mold of the other ideal. And one day, we meet someone who seems to fit this model perfectly. When this happens, the attraction can be so intense that it feels like fate. We have the feeling that we have known that person for a long time, even if the contact has just begun. It seems like a reunion of souls, as if it was something written eons ago. However, Jung makes an important warning: this is not a sign that we have found a soul mate. It is the unconscious recognizing, in the other, something that resembles the image that we secretly carry within us. What we feel as magic or mystical connection is actually a deep emotional mirror. And here's the second reason someone might fall in love with you: you awaken a symbolic, powerful image that already existed in the other person's unconscious. You become a kind of key that activates intense emotions. It may have nothing to do with your physical appearance or behavior, but with the energy you transmit, with the essence you communicate. It is as if your presence touches an invisible point within the other person's psyche, a point that has been waiting for this awakening. That's why some connections seem immediate, irrational, and overwhelming. It's not just about you, but about what you represent to the other person's internal world. However, this type of passion also carries a risk. When someone falls in love with an idealized image projected onto you, they are not really seeing who you are. She is seeing a fantasy, an idea, a psychological construction that began long before you entered her life. You become a screen on which she projects everything she wants, fears, or seeks. And as your true personality begins to appear, with its flaws, its doubts, its contradictions, that fantasy begins to unravel. What seemed perfect proves to be complex. That which seemed divine becomes human. Conflicts arise, frustrations accumulate, and, often, what was enchantment turns into disillusionment. That is why so many relationships that begin with enthusiasm and intense passion end in confusion, estrangement, or even hurt. They were founded not on real recognition between two people, but on an unconscious projection. Love seemed strong, but it was fragile. The connection seemed deep, but it was built on an idealized image. Jung explained that no human being can sustain an archetypal role forever. No real person can live up to a mythical figure. Sooner or later, reality imposes itself, and with it come the challenges of true love, which requires presence, listening, and mutual acceptance. Despite the frustrations that can arise when a projection falls apart, Carl Jung did not see it as a tragedy. On the contrary, he believed that these experiences are fundamental for our inner maturation. For him, love is not just a pleasurable emotion, it is an instrument of profound transformation. Each person we fall in love with works as a mirror. And the reflection we see shows us aspects that we need to see in ourselves. Some people awaken dormant abilities in us. Others reveal deep fears. There are those who provoke our creativity, and there are those who expose our insecurities. But deep down, they all fulfill the same psychological role: to accelerate our growth process. This process is what Jung called individuation, the path of becoming whole. To integrate light and shadow, reason and emotion, strength and vulnerability. Each meaningful encounter has the potential to bring us closer to who we really are. When someone falls in love with you, they may believe that they are seeing something extraordinary in their essence, and they are. But this charm isn't just about you. It's about what you awaken within the other person. You become a symbol, a turning point, an emotional invitation that activates an inner change. And the same applies to you. The people you fall in love with, especially those who shake you, transform you, make you feel intensely, don't come about by chance. They are messengers of the unconscious. They are there to activate important processes in your inner world. Some appear to awaken dormant parts of you. Others come to teach you lessons that you have avoided learning. There are also those whose function is to show their own reflection, sometimes clear, sometimes distorted, depending on their willingness to look sincerely. Not all of these connections are built to last. Some arise to shake up, destabilize, break old patterns. Jung called these encounters synchronic events, events that, while unexplained logically, carry deep meaning. When someone comes into your life at just the right moment and provokes intense feelings, it may not be a coincidence. It is possible that the unconscious of both was already ready. And the meeting was the sign that a change was underway. These moments, even painful ones, and especially painful ones, are not mistakes. They are invitations to evolution. Scars are also steps. So why do people fall in love with you? Because either you reflect something that is missing in them, or you reactivate something that they have forgotten within themselves. In both cases, the feeling is not exactly about you, but about the desire for transformation that lives in them. And the same happens with you. You are attracted to the one who represents your lost pieces. By those who embody their inner images. By whom, consciously or unconsciously, carries the key to your next chapter. However, if these patterns are not clearly perceived, there is a risk of repeating stories, always being attracted to the same types, living relationships with similar endings, reliving old illusions. The person may think that they are unlucky in love, when in fact they are being led by unconscious content that is not yet understood. Jung said that the secret is in consciousness. When you understand your projections, your archetypes, your emotional habits, you stop looking for someone who completes you, and you start to become complete by yourself. From then on, love changes. It is no longer based on lack or fantasy and is built on solidity. It becomes more true, freer, more serene. Because, at the end of the day, deepest love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about awakening, in you, the parts that were dormant. It's not just about loving the other, it's about being enchanted by the version of yourself that encounter revealed. To understand love through Jung's eyes is to understand that the feeling is never just about the other. In the end, every love story is also a journey of return to oneself. So the next time someone falls in love with you, or when you feel that intense connection with someone, ask yourself, what part of my soul is awakening right now? The idea that love is a journey of self-knowledge may seem distant to those who are hurt, to those who have found themselves stuck in frustrating relationships, or to those who feel that they always attract the same type of person and suffer from it. But in the light of depth psychology, these patterns are neither punishment nor cruel fate. They are invitations. Invitations to look within. To notice what is being repeated. And mainly, to find out what still needs to be cured. According to Carl Jung, what we call pattern is nothing more than a reflection of the unconscious trying to become conscious. When you repeatedly fall in love with emotionally unavailable people, for example, it's not bad luck. It's a part of you, perhaps neglected since childhood, asking for attention. Asking to be welcomed, recognized, rescued. The other, in this case, is just the messenger. The real process happens within you. Jung believed that every symptom is an attempt at a cure. And this also applies to the heart. What hurts in relationships, jealousy, fears, misunderstandings, often point to older wounds. Wounds that were covered with layers of rationalization, strength, forced independence. But love, as a natural force that it is, always seeks what is hidden. It brings to light what has been repressed. That's why falling in love is dangerous, and at the same time, necessary. Because it forces us to see ourselves. And seeing is not always comfortable. But it is liberating. The encounter with the other is, in fact, a reunion with oneself. When a person enchants us, it is usually because he gives us back a forgotten part. When a person hurts us, they are also pointing us to an inner territory that has not yet been healed. It's not about guilt. It's about awareness. You no longer have to fight your choices. You need to understand them. When you sincerely ask yourself, why does this appeal to me, or why does it hurt me so much, you begin to tear the veil of illusion. You stop blaming the other, and start transforming yourself. This is the alchemy of love. Jung introduced a fundamental concept for understanding emotional dynamics, the shadow. The shadow is everything that has been excluded from consciousness. Parts of yourself that you learned, early on, were not acceptable. It can be anger, sensuality, vulnerability, ambition, or even spontaneous joy. These parts were repressed so that you could be accepted in the environment where you grew up. But they have not disappeared. They hid. And one day, they appear. Often, in the form of someone else. You meet someone and feel fascination, or repulsion. And often this extreme reaction has less to do with the other and more to do with your own shadow. You are being confronted by something that you cannot recognize in yourself. Something that was exiled, but now returns, asking for space. When this happens in a love relationship, the impact is enormous. Because intimacy opens everything wide open. Love deepens the mirror. And sooner or later, what was hidden will emerge. That's why the most intense relationships are also the most challenging. They mess with everything. They reveal what you try to hide even from yourself. But they are also the ones that heal the most. When you accept that the other is not there to meet all your needs, but to show you where your needs are, when you understand that the other will not always welcome you, but will show you where you need to welcome yourself, then love becomes a tool for evolution. What was once drama becomes learning. What was guilt becomes responsibility. What was an escape becomes a presence. One of the biggest challenges in love is to get out of the plane of idealization and down to the ground of reality. While we are in love, it is common to see the other with enchanted eyes. We create projections, expectations, fantasies. We attribute to that person qualities that he or she often does not have, or does not have in the way we imagine. But sooner or later, the veil falls. And it is at this moment that true love has the chance to be born. Because while you love an idea, you don't really love it. You love it. You venerate. You wish. But to love, really love, it is to look at the other as he is. With its contradictions, its pains, its failures. And yet, remain. Not because of lack, but by choice. This is the transition point between passion and mature love. Jung said that no one can sustain a projection forever. The archetype will crumble. And when it collapses, what remains? If you can see the human being behind the image, then there is room for something authentic. A relationship between two wholes. Not between two halves trying to complete each other, but between two individuals willing to walk together without imprisonment, without idealizing, without getting lost. This kind of love is rare. Because it requires courage. Courage to be seen. Courage to see. Courage not to run away when the mirror shows the pain. Courage to stay when the enchantment ends. But it is this love that transforms. It is this love that heals. It is this love that teaches. The idea that we need someone to complete us is one of the most dangerous traps of effective culture. It makes us believe that we will only be whole when we are with someone. That alone we are pieces, fragments, halves. But this idea is false. And deeply painful. You are already whole. You already have within you all the aspects that you seek in others. The lightness, the depth, the strength, the delicacy. All of this lives there, waiting to be recognized. And the more you integrate these parts into yourself, the less you need to look for them in each other. And, paradoxically, when you don't need it anymore, that's when love arrives. Not as a necessity, but as sharing. Not as an escape. But how do I find it? Not as dependency, but as freedom. Jung said that true love only happens between two people who have done a certain amount of inner work. Who recognized their shadows, who embraced their contradictions, who accepted the process itself. People who do not seek in the other what they have not yet found in themselves, but who unite to continue growing together. This is conscious love. A love that does not promise eternity, but presence. A love that does not guarantee perfection, but truth. And that's what we need. Of less fantasy and more presence. Of less expectations and more listening. Of less projection and more encounter.